Hey everyone, Nelson here from Priority Bicycles, and today we're going to assemble the Priority Continuum Onyx.
Before we get started, it's important to know that we always recommend that your bicycle be professionally assembled. Or if you choose to follow this video and do home assembly, we recommend that a professional bicycle mechanic safety check your bicycle before riding. Now let's get started.
Before we get started, we'll want to come to the side of your box so we can see the labels here. You'll see two labels. One label, which is your order, which will have your order number, and you'll also see the description of the bike here. You'll want to take a photo of both of these in case you have any issues with your bike and want to contact us. Now let's get your box opened up. You'll want to use a pair of household scissors, diagonal cutters, or a box cutter. Reach into the box and pull your bicycle out. Don't forget to reach into the box and remove your spare parts box and your saddle. Here we'll have the saddle. You want to remove the seat post first. Inside your box you'll see your owner's manual. It's a good thing to stop what we're doing now. Review these manuals before going forward. You'll also see a set of tools in this package. Your pedals, the X-Lock tool, rear reflector, hardware for the front brake, some touch-up paint, and some hardware for the fender. Now that we removed all the parts from your spare parts box, let's get to removing the packaging material off of your bike. Let's start by removing all the zip ties first. With all the zip ties removed, let's go ahead and remove the front wheel by rolling it forward and away from the crank arm. With all the packing removed off of the front wheel and the fender, we can place this off to the side and continue to remove the packaging off of the bike. When you remove the bicycle out of the box, you'll notice that the fork is on backwards. You'll see this sticker here showing that it's backwards and indicating that you'll need to turn it. To do so, pick up the front end of the bike, rotate the fork 180 degrees so that it's now facing forward. Then, grab your 5mm Allen key to remove the stem top cap. Remove the cap and remove the spacer packaging. Grab your stem and handlebar and place it over the stereo tube. Then, grab your stem top cap and thread it into the stereo tube using your 5mm Allen key. No need to crank this down, as we'll do so later in the video. With the stem and handlebar on the bike, let's make sure that our cables are routed properly. We have our front brake hose coming in front of all the cables and then down. We have our rear brake hose coming behind the front brake and to the back. We have our shift wires here. One of them is going towards the right and the other one towards the left. And then we have our electric wires coming from the left side of the stem and then over to the right towards the back and then one towards the fork. If your cables are tangled in any way, refer to this section of the video to ensure that they are aligned properly. Now let's remove the rest of the packaging of the fork. Using the hardware that came in your small parts box, we're going to install the front brake. Grab your brake caliper and remove the pad spacer. Then with the logo on the caliper facing outward, we're going to place it over these posts here. Then grab one of the bolts with your 5mm Allen key and thread it into the fork. No need to lock these down, as we'll do so later in the video. Now let's install the wheel. You'll notice on your axle that you have both a standard 15mm dome nut and the X-Lock security nut system. We'll want to unthread these enough so that we can slide it onto the fork. Once you unthread it enough, grab the washer and pull it towards the axle nut. Do the same thing on the opposite side. Now let's grab the front end of your bike, pick it up, and roll the front wheel into the fork. Place the drop out over the axle, and make sure that the rotor is centered in the caliper, like so. Before locking down the axle nuts, we'll want to rotate the axle so that the connection port of the dynamo is facing roughly at the 11 or 10 o'clock position. Here is the connection. We're just going to grab that, rotate it, and then with the dynamo port facing the 10 or 11 o'clock position, let's grab the dynamo plug here, and you'll notice that it is keyed. So it will only go in one direction. We're going to grab it and slide it into the hub, like so. With the dynamo plug connected, we can now tighten the axle nuts. On the right side, you will notice the X-lock nut, which will need the X-lock key. Place the key over the nut so that the notches align with the grooves on the axle, with the grooves on the nut. Then start by threading it in by hand, and then go in with your tool to tighten it down. You'll want to get the right side just a little snug, and then go to the left side of the bike to get the other axle nut snug. And then from here, you'll want to go back and forth between each one. Locking down only one side will cause the dynamo plug port to rotate. If you have a torque wrench, you'll want to lock these down to 25 Newton meters. With the front wheel on the bike, let's use our kickstand to prop the bicycle up. With the wheel on the bike, let's install your fender. With this, you'll need your fender hardware that came in your small parts box. We'll want to unthread the nut at the back end, remove the washer and the concaved washer. Then, with the bolt and one washer, we'll slide that through the front end of the fork. Slide the bolt and the washer through the front end. Then grab your concaved washer. Slide the concaved section towards the fork and the flat section towards the back. Grab your fender. We'll want to slide the front end of the fender through the back end and make sure that the wire for the dynamo is between the fork and the fender. Then grab your washer and nut to hold everything together. We can leave this loose for now and work on the struts at the bottom end of the fork. Using your 4mm Allen key, we'll want to remove this bolt here. Then feed the bolt through the strut and thread it into the fork. Before locking it in place, let's just move the strut as far outward as possible and tighten down that bolt. You'll want to do the same thing on the opposite side. With the struts in place, we can now lock down this bolt. Make sure your fender is as high as it can go, where it touches the bottom section of the fork. Use your 10mm wrench at the back end to hold the nut in place, and then your 5mm Allen key on the front end to tighten the bolt. For more information on how to adjust your fender, click the link in the description below. Now let's attach the rear fender. We'll want to remove this bolt here using your 4mm Allen key. Then grab the bolt, feed it through the eyelet of the strut, and thread it into the frame. Before locking it down, make sure to pull the strut outward, like so. Make sure to do the same thing on the opposite side. Now let's install your pedals onto the crank. You notice that your pedals are labeled R for right and L for left. If it does not have a sticker, refer to the axle where I'll have R for right and again L for left. Let's start by installing your right pedal. If you have some grease, it's best to apply some onto the threads. And then we're going to thread this onto the crank. When doing so, make sure to turn the pedal towards the right or clockwise to tighten it on. We just want to get this on with a few threads. Then we'll use our 15mm wrench to finish the job. To lock down the pedals, we'll put one hand at the top of the wheel here and the other hand here on the wrench. Make sure your crank is facing forward when doing so. And we're going to hold the wheel in place and crank down. If you have a torque wrench, make sure to torque it down to 40 Newton meters. Let's install the left pedal. Again, if you have some grease, it's best to apply it onto the threads. Then thread it into the crank arm. On the left side, you'll want to turn to the left or counterclockwise. Just get that threaded by hand to a few threads and then grab your 15mm wrench to finish the job. Then to lock down the pedal, we'll want to hold the rear wheel again at that 12 o'clock position with one hand, 15mm wrench on the pedal, then hold the wheel in place and turn the wrench to the left or counterclockwise to crank it down. If you have a torque wrench, torque this down to 40 Newton meters. Let's install your seat post onto the frame. When doing so, make sure that the minimum insertion is inside the frame at all times. Grab your X-lock key and insert it over the X-lock nut. We're just going to get this snug for now, as we'll adjust the seat post later in the video. Now let's install your saddle onto the seat post. You'll want to loosen these two bolts here using your 5mm Allen key. Then grab your saddle and install it onto the seat post. Now tighten these bolts here until you get the proper adjustment for the rider's needs and torque them down to 12 Newton meters. For more information on how to adjust your saddle, click the link in the description below. With the bike mostly put together, let's make sure that our stem and handlebar are ergonomically correct for the rider and that our front brake is properly adjusted. To adjust your headset, we'll want to compress this bolt up here. To do so, make sure that these bolts here are loose using your 4mm Allen key. Then, using your 5mm Allen key, you want to compress the top cap, just enough so that there isn't any play in the headset. Then, hold your front wheel in place and align your stem to it. From here, we can now lock down our stem bolts using our 4mm Allen key. If you have a torque wrench, you'll want to lock these down to 6 Newton meters. If you want to change the angle of the handlebars, you'll want to loosen these bolts here, change the angle, and then tighten them back up. Make sure to torque them down to 6 Newton meters. If you're not going to adjust the handlebar, it's best to at least check the bolts to make sure they're properly tightened. For more information on how to adjust your handlebar and stem, check the link in the description below. Let's get your front reflector aligned properly. We'll want to use a Phillips head screwdriver to loosen it first. Then bring it in towards the stem, like so. Make sure it's facing forward. Then tighten down the Phillips head screw. To adjust your front brake, we'll need to loosen these two bolts here. A simple trick here is to make sure that the caliper is loose. Then squeeze the brake lever and then tighten these bolts while still holding the brake lever. Make sure that you have even spacing between the rotor and the brake pads. For the rear reflector, which was located in your small parts box, you want to grab it, open it up, then go around the seat post. Grab the screw and lock it down. Make sure that the angle of the reflector is facing straight back. Make sure when you tighten down, it's closest to the seat as possible. Let's now adjust your seat height. We can do so again by using your X-lock key to loosen the X-lock nut on the non-drive side. Loosen it, and then slide your seat down, and you roughly want it to be about hip bone height when standing right next to it. For more information on how to adjust your saddle and your seat post, click the link in the description below. Now let's inflate our tires before we go on our first ride. Make sure you have a pump, and you'll want to inflate this to the max PSI. If you look on the sidewall of the tire, it'll let you know what the max PSI is. On this tire, the WTB Slick, the max PSI is 90. Thanks for joining me in assembling the Priority Continuum Onyx. Before going on your first ride, it's best to get the bicycle safety checked by a professional mechanic. If you have any questions or concerns, feel free to reach out to us. Our information's at the bottom of the screen.